It's time now for French Connections, our weekly look at all the intricacies of life in France. And we have Florence Villemona with us here on the set to help us with that. Hi, Flo.
Hi, Jeannie.
Now, this week you're going to focus on a political party, a controversial one, the far-right party, the National Front. Now, this isn't a French specialty per se. Similar parties exist across Europe, but it's definitely something people in France and outside of France pay very close attention to, particularly in the lead up to next year's presidential election.
That's right. The National Front, or the Front National, is definitely an object of fascination abroad and even in France. And in fact, this week it was in the spotlight for alleged links to the whole Panama Papers scandal. And the burning question is, could this hurt the party's chances in the 2017 presidential election? Because things are looking pretty good for the party so far. In fact, recent polls suggest that if the election were held today, the party's leader, Marine Le Pen, would definitely reach the second round.
And it's true, the National Front has experienced a stunning breakthrough on the political stage in recent years. It has really become a challenge to more mainstream parties, which we never saw before. And this is really a turnaround from when it first was founded many years ago.
That's right. The National Front was founded in 1972 by Marine Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen. Now, he's quite a controversial and polarizing figure in French politics. In fact, the mainstream media nicknamed him the Devil of the Republic because he's known for having quite a hot temper and often making very controversial, anti-Semitic, and even at times racist comments that have actually drawn him repeated convictions for hate speech. In fact, let's listen to a comment he made back in 1987.
I'm not saying gas chambers didn't exist. I'm just saying that it's a detail of the history of World War II.
Now, that has become somewhat of a catchphrase for Jean-Marie Le Pen, and it's also gotten him into a lot of trouble. In fact, just this week, a court here in Paris fined him some 30,000 euros for repeating that statement last year. But what's interesting is under his watch, the National Front really established itself as a powerful fringe party, and in 2002, it surprised everyone because that was the presidential election. He made it to the second round against Jacques Chirac. It was really shocking for people at the time, and that election happened on the 21st of April, le 21 avril, and for many people, it's gone down as a dark day in French history.
Now, what's been so interesting observing the National Front over the years is that now it's his daughter, Marine, who currently heads up the National Front, who's brought the party from the sidelines to the center playing field of French politics.
That's right. She was elected party leader in 2011, and she immediately sought to clean up the party's image. There's actually a word for her strategy in French. That's our word du jour. It's dédiabolisation. Now, you could translate that as demonizing or essentially detoxifying the party. Essentially, she wanted to break away from her father's xenophobic speech towards something a little softer and a little bit more open. And it's really interesting to listen to her speeches. Let's listen to her a couple years back.
Whether you're a man or a woman, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, heterosexual, homosexual, we are first and foremost French.
By broadening its themes, the National Front no longer just preaches to the converted. It attracts more people. It speaks to all voters, including voters in the left wing.
And it's interesting, that strategy really does seem to be working. Since Marine Le Pen was elected party president, the National Front has made some sizable electoral gains.
That's right. It keeps beating its own records in elections, whether it's European elections or municipal elections. And last year, we talked a whole lot about the regional elections because the National Front stunned everyone by winning the first round of those elections. It won a record 28% of the national vote. Now, what's interesting is in the second round, it didn't win a single region because there was kind of a national rally to stop it in its tracks.
Now, the big interesting question oftentimes just after elections here in France is who actually votes for the National Front?
Well, it's actually changing over the years. Traditionally, it's been mainly white, elderly people who live in rural areas. But in recent years, the National Front has really managed to win over the working class, which traditionally voted for the far left. And another interesting change is that more and more young people are being drawn to the National Front. Now, why is that? Well, like elsewhere in Europe, the National Front has really managed to surf on a wave of dissatisfaction in other mainstream political parties and the economy and unemployment, and all this compounded by, of course, the refugee crisis and the recent terrorist attacks here in France. Let's listen, actually, to some National Front voters.
I'm worried about the refugees that are coming. When you see what happened in Paris, we're really worried.
We're scared. We're scared there could be a terrorist attack in our small village. It's true it tends to happen in big cities, but we don't feel safe.
The government brings all these foreigners into France and they get everything. And poor French people pay for it. We're fed up.
Well, as you heard there from many disgruntled voters, Marine Le Pen really embodies change. But I guess the big question is has the party truly changed?
Well, like her or not, she's a very clever politician, and she has managed to distance herself from her father. She had a very public falling out with him last year, for instance. But if you actually look at the party program, she's following exactly in her father's footsteps. Let's take a look. She argues that France should leave the EU, reintroduce border controls, step up law and order, put in place protectionist economic policies, and defend France's white Judeo-Christian roots against immigrants, essentially. So the packaging may be different, but the message is very well the same message. And what's interesting is it's a message that's starting to creep in to other political parties as well. They're starting to almost steal her ideas. And that's exactly what scares a lot of people here in France. And that's why her critics call her a danger to French democracy, because no matter how many coats of fresh paint you try to put on the party, it's still the same party under the surface. It's a party that's attracting more and more voters and that's getting closer and closer to power.
All right, Florence Villeminot, thank you so much for that. A look at perhaps the most controversial political party here in France, the National Front. Florence Villeminot there with the very latest French connections. Don't forget, if you want to find out about anything about what's happening in France from a societal point of view, political point of view, whatever, be sure to contact Flo at her Twitter at Flo Villeminot.